Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Diary of a Sales Engineer. This week we are on episode 17. I'm Ryan Kruger with my co-host
Samir Sahai Kosser, and today we have an exciting person on the pod, Chris White. For those of you who don't know, he is the author of the 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers and runs Tech Sales Mastery, and honestly was one of the first authors and first books that I read when getting into sales engineering. So I was really excited to have Chris here. I had the pleasure to meet him in person back in November. We had a great time in New York. And yeah, we're super excited to talk to you, Chris. It's really cool to have another legend who you are like reading about and learn so much about, like my foundational, to actually have a conversation with you. So welcome to the pod.
Happy to be here, guys. Thanks for inviting me, and congratulations on the podcast, episode 17 on the 17th of February, no less. So good for you. That's fabulous. Happy to be here.
I did not even notice that. Well, so for folks who don't know, what the 6 habits are, the high level overview of that, you want to just give a Spark Notes version of it just to get everyone level set here?
Of course, and I'll even preface it with how they came to be. Many people and some of your listeners may know my story, but in a nutshell, I spent 15 years in a high-tech role. I was an enterprise architect working with companies like Freddie Mac, federal government, and it was 15 years into that career before I made the jump into pre-sales. And when I did make that jump, I thought I was going to be brilliant because, as I like to say, I could move a mouse and talk at the same time. I thought all there was to being successful in this role was being an expert and being good in front of an audience. And I found out very, very quickly that there was a lot that I didn't understand and know about sales. In fact, I didn't even think of myself as a sales professional. I still thought of myself as a technical professional who just had a new role working with the sales folks. So after I made a lot of mistakes, I finally and slowly started figuring things out. And over a period of about 6 to 12 months, I discovered sort of a pattern of behavior that produced the results that I wanted, that my team wanted, that customers wanted. And that was really sort of the birth of the 6 habits. In fact, it really wasn't until about 5 years later that I moved into management, and I inherited a team of sales engineers and discovered that they were making many of the same mistakes that I was making. This was in 2010. And there wasn't a lot of training on the market at the time. So I created some training for my team based on the lessons that I had learned. And that really was the early version of the 6 habits. So, Samir, with that background, very briefly, the 6 habits. The first and most important habit in my book is to partner with sales. We need to think of our relationship with sales as a partnership. Number 2 is all around discovery. I learned very quickly that I couldn't just, and by the way, when I first got into this profession, I had a big ego. And I just thought, you know what, I'm an expert, just drop me in front of anybody and I'll do my thing. Well, I found out very, very quickly that I needed to do some discovery before I entered the room. Habit number 2 is to probe. Number 3, what I learned is that one of the most important things for us to do is always show up prepared. But the mistake that I made was when I was preparing for meetings, I was focusing too much on the wrong things. The technology, the features, the functions, capabilities, everything that I was going to do and everything about my product. What I wasn't focusing on was the story and the message and their situation, their story. And then habit number 4, so habit number 3 became to prepare. Mm-hmm. Habit number 4, by the way, I'm hearing a little bell. Is that on my side? Is that on your side? Or that's
my fault. I've turned it off.
Okay. That's all good. I mean, look, we're sales engineers, right? We just roll. Mm-hmm. Habit number 4 was born from a mistake that I made, which was as I was preparing for demos, I was focused so much on what it was that I was going to present. I didn't leave enough time to practice and check all my work. And then I would get in front of the customer and I'd click into something and all of a sudden it wasn't working because I had changed something over there and forgot that it affected this thing over here. And then when I went back and looked, I realized that I could have found it in 5 seconds. I could have fixed it in 30 seconds. And then that never would have happened. So habit number 4 became to practice. Just click every click, as I like to say. Habit number 5 is to perform. And arguably it's the most meaty of the habits, if I can use that term. It's all about how do we engage with the customer. And there, as I like to say, there are certain things we need to say, show, and do in order to achieve the objective of the meeting, and things that we need to avoid saying, showing, and doing. So habit number 5 is all about the customer-facing delivery. And then habit number 6 is to perfect. And it's all about the continuous improvement loop. So anyway, in a nutshell, Samir, those are the 6 habits that I discovered for myself and then wrote about, 5.5 years ago now.
Yeah, those have been a big driving force of how I've thought about my career and whatnot. And I think one of the things that was hard for me to do is accept that I was a sales guy when I first transitioned in, coming from like a software engineer into sales engineering. For whatever reason, I had this like icky feeling of being a sales guy. And I think that's just like the used car salesman persona that like sales has a kind of a bad rep. So I'm curious, like for you, how did you ultimately embody that yes, now I am a sales guy. I'm not just the technical guy jumping in. I'm actually in sales.
Took me some time, Samir. And I think a lot of us who come from a high tech background, whether that's a consulting role like myself, a programmer, developer, architect, what have you, I do think that we have a perception of sales and sales professionals as the used car sales professional. And it does. I think it almost feels, if I can use the word slimy, like I wrote this in the book. Look, I was condescending. I felt like sales was beneath me, right? I'm not a sales professional. How did I get there? There's two significant things I think that happened for me. Number one, and I wrote this story in the book. I was shortly after I had started this part of my career, I was at a dinner party, met a family that had just moved into town. I was chatting with a guy, and I think I was boring him to death about enterprise architecture and what I did. And then I said, actually, I just recently got a new job, and now I'm the guy who goes in and gives demos to prospects and customers with this. And with this, like literally his face lit up, and he was like, "Oh, you're in software sales," or "Oh, you're in sales." And I thought to myself, did you not hear what I was talking about with enterprise architecture? But I thought, you know what, I just sort of played along. But then that night I was lying in bed, literally, and I found it like hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my gosh, I'm in sales. Like I need to come to peace with that. The other thing is that I discovered is that the more I got into the role and the more I learned to do discovery and really understood what customers were trying to achieve, what I learned is that I was actually in a position now to help organizations who are really struggling with certain things that the solutions that we sold could solve for. And what I discovered is that without sales, companies like the one that I work for and the countless other software organizations out there, they're not helping the people that can benefit from their solution if you don't have sales professionals. So for anyone out there who thinks that selling or sales is a 4-letter word, allow me to suggest that sales is actually a noble profession. And we're in the business of helping people. So that's how I came to peace with it, Samir.
And one thing I'll chime in there with is something that I find to be extremely common among almost every single sales engineer, solution consultant, solution engineer, whatever you want to call us, is that they all love helping people. So if you like helping people and you like the technical aspect and you like possibly doing some sales, like sales engineering is the perfect role for you. And that's one way that I really look at how my sales is different, is just I'm always in it to help out the customer. What can I find out about your organization that you're struggling with today that my product can help with? There's always one story to me that I really resonate with within my sales career, which was during my time of selling ERP. I met with these two folks and they were telling me that they were so bogged down with their everyday work so that they would actually spend the weekends working. That was just a part of their average week. Yep, Saturdays and Sundays come by. I'm missing my kid's soccer game because I have to spend time entering in transactions, doing all these things. So before we got into the demo, I told them, look, the whole purpose of the demo is going to be to get you your weekends back. If we don't accomplish that within the demonstration, I wouldn't recommend going forward with this. But if we do, then I would. So at the end of the demo, I said, do you think you'd have your weekends back? They said yes, bought the software within like 2 days later, legal review, everything all done. That's the difference. And that's how we can really do that piece that you mentioned of impactful demos, right? When it comes to the performance aspect, is taking everything else from the very beginning of the other habits and combining that into the showtime aspect, right? I heard what you said, and now I'm going to actually perform and make sure to hit on what's important to you.
100%. Love that story, Ryan. At the end of the day, and this is something that many people have heard me say before, and it's really in line with what you're saying. We are most fulfilled when serving other people. And to me, that's really what sales is all about. It's serving others. Now, we get caught up in the competition. We get caught up in the pursuit of winning deals. We get caught up in pursuit of the almighty commission check, right? So we lose sight of that sometimes. And we have to constantly remind ourselves, this is about you, not about me, right? But the more we remind ourselves, look, I'm here for them. I'm here to see if we have a solution that will work for them. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, fine, we'll just move on. So really well said.
I'm really curious, like without having any sort of like formal training process, you're thrown into the fire, you're becoming a sales engineer. How did you identify that particular school of thought of saying it's about you, it's not about me? Because I think that's so easy to lose as a salesperson. But now there's a lot of books, there's a lot of references, there's podcasts like this that will tell you, hey, it is about them, focus on them. So how did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah. You know, Ryan, it's a tough question that I'm going to just say it over time, and even to this very day, I'm not batting 1,000 on what I'm talking about right now. Right? I think we naturally default to doing what's in our best interest. Right? We naturally it's human nature. So I think. If you wrap your head around this idea that to sell is to serve, and if you sincerely want to do right by others and sincerely want to do right by your prospects and your customers, then once you come to that realization, it still takes almost a daily reminder to, and in fact, it almost takes a reminder as often as you can whenever you enter a meeting. Just it's almost like a conscious reminder. Okay, make this about them, not about me, right? So I think it's a process, Ryan, to answer your question, and I think it's a professional maturity that takes place, and I also think it's an individual maturity that takes place.
I love that. To sell is to serve. I think that's something that can be an easy sticky note reminder, right there on the monitor. So, the first habit was partnering with your sales rep.
Yep.
There are times where my sales rep and I disagree, or they, classic sales rep promises some feature that doesn't exist, and now I have to go and show something that's not there. In those types of situations, like given your experience and how you've actually like worked with your teams, how do you go and alleviate that type of tension when I'm messing up, they're messing up? Like how do you embrace that relationship so it's beneficial for all sides?
Yeah, a number of thoughts come to mind, Samir. First of all, something that you just mentioned at the end there. They're messing up, I'm messing up. I think that maybe is one of the parts of the foundation, which is to accept that none of us is perfect, and none of us are always going to be right. Right. So I think it starts there. I think a lot of times sales engineers, we tend to look at the account executives, and all we see is a very limited portion of what they actually do. And I think in our minds, we think, man, I could do that. They just schedule the meeting and bring me in and then stand me up and let me go. And they just sit there and listen. And then the meeting closes and they buy, and then he or she gets the commission check, And so a lot of us see that and like, what's going on here? What they don't see is all the work that it took first just to get the meeting, right? All the rejection, all the the calls that weren't answered and the doors that were knocked on, right? So they don't see all that work. Number one. Number two, I think we tend not to see the pressure that they're under, right? We're not under the same kind of pressure that they are. I mean, they've got to answer to their manager on a weekly basis, quarterly basis, monthly basis, et cetera. So I really do think it begins with just appreciating the fact that their job is tough. It really is tough. Mm-hmm. Another thing you mentioned is disagreement, and disagreement is going to happen. And by the way, sales and pre-sales, account executives, SE, we think differently. We're wired differently. We approach things differently, right? And AE has never seen an opportunity that didn't look like this year's best opportunity, right? They just tend to be very trustworthy and very quick to extend the benefit of the doubt, whereas we tend to be a little bit skeptical, right? So we're, an opportunity comes across the plate and we're looking for reasons to shoot holes in it, right? Neither one is right or wrong, by the way. But I will say this. Too often I see sales engineers feeling as though they can't speak their mind. Mm-hmm. And they can't share their opinion on maybe how to approach a meeting or how to approach an opportunity. I think that's a mistake. I think we need to learn to find our voice. We need to think, again, this comes back to Ryan, what we were just talking about. What's in the best interest of the customer? What's in the best interest of the company that I represent? What's in the best interest of the team, and what do I think is the best interest in my best interest, right? I think we have to go through that order, but we have to find our voice. But if we still have a disagreement, I call this the 51-49 rule. I have 49% of the vote. They have 51% of the vote. They have the last word. Why? It's their opportunity. At the end of the day, if we don't hit the number, he or she is far more likely to lose their job than I am, right? So they get but it can't be 90-10 or 80-20, right? It's close to 50-50, but they get the final word. Mm-hmm. I'll pause there just for a moment. Does that strike a chord with you guys?
It definitely does. There's actually something that Samir and I have recommended before on one of our early episodes of the podcast when we're talking about the relationship with sales. And that is actually sitting down with your account executive counterpart and actually asking them, what is your quota attainment? What does that look like? Here's how I get compensated. And you should have that open, honest conversation with your rep so they know why you're incentivized and you know why they're incentivized and what it means to them, because they are going to be under more pressure than you at certain times. So when they're trying to force a deal forward, you can sit back and go, I understand it now. They have to, because they have to hit a certain number this quarter. They might end up getting put on PIP. Like, these are very important conversations to have that aren't happening in pre-sales today. So go to your rep, ask them, sit down and have that open, honest conversation so you can understand the other side of the table. I think that is such an important thing to do that just no one is talking about.
And by the way, pick up the phone and have a phone call or a Zoom call or go have lunch together, right? Like through Slack or chat or Teams or whatever it is, that's not going to cut it. So completely agree.
I think the when I was a young SC, I did not understand what sales did at all. Like what you just described was me. I was like, they just show up on the call, they introduce me, and they go, no camera, mute. And I was getting frustrated. I was like, what is going on? And then as I got older and like actually saw and done some of the work myself, I was like, oh wow, there's so much on the back end that they actually just shield us from, which allows us to focus on our job and that performance aspect. So now I have a lot more gratitude towards the work of the AE.
Well, Samir, if I may, just another thought that was triggered when you were sharing there. We are used to being invited in to the party, as I like to say, as the expert, which is what we like, right? They have to get the party started. Right? They have to find the people who might be interested and convince them to just take a meeting to begin with, right? We have the luxury of that already being done, and now we get to step in like the knight in shining armor and do our thing, right? So what's the point? Many of us, I'll say most of us, wouldn't actually like that job. Now, Some would, and I know quite a few account executives who were sales engineers at one point in their career, and they decided that they did want to step into that role, and they've done wonderfully well. So, if you feel like you're the person who isn't afraid to step in and get the party started, maybe you would be a better account executive. But I think that is an important point.
I do think it's important to call out, though, that if you are a sales engineer that's wanting to make the switch over into sales, you have to understand those first few calls, you are not the expert, and you're going to be bringing in the expert. Also, the prospects are now going to view you as the salesperson. I can't tell you how many times I've been on calls, demos, where my rep says something and the prospect is just like shaking them off right away. It's like, no, I don't really care. They'll ask me the same exact question. I'll say the exact same thing. Oh, okay, Ryan, that makes tons of sense, right? You have to understand that if you switch roles, you are also switching perception from the actual buyers. So don't get it twisted that it's like, I can switch over into sales tomorrow, be super successful. It's going to come with a huge learning curve. If you're going to make the switch over, watch the best people at the company. Figure out what they are saying, what they are doing, take notes of it, figure it out versus just assuming you know everything. You are no longer the expert. You are moving from sales engineering into sales. So you should go out there and try to learn a few things.
It's a very different role and we need very different muscles for sure.
Yeah, I always compare it to like the talent manager and the talent, where like the talent manager is the one busting down doors, finding the venues for you to perform at, like getting the deals, getting you paid, and then the talent is the one who just shows up and performs. And both are absolutely needed for success and take very different skill sets.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I like being called the talent though, Smear. Like, that's cool. Like in that analogy, we're the superstars. I'm all right with that.
We're also the divas.
Yeah, we are the divas, right? When something happens in a deal cycle where you don't agree with your rep, typically, Chris, to your point, I've seen so many times, even in myself and in watching other people, where they'll say like, no, this is what we have to do. But they're not trying to work with the rep. But to your point, I'm in full agreement. It's the rep's deal. So like at the end of the day, they have final vote over what you want to do. So you might have a really strong feeling, but you have to understand that if you don't have a strong enough relationship to convince them of your viewpoint, it's going to be whatever they want, because they also have the backing of sales attached to it, right? You'd have to really go to bat and fight things. And you don't want to be the sales engineer that's always fighting with the rep. You want to be the sales engineer that has a cohesive partnership. And when you are working together, you can say, hey, look, they brought this up today. I'm really concerned about it. We need to actually spend some time walking through this. We should get a 30-minute meeting on the calendar. If you have a bad relationship with your rep, it's going to look a lot like this, where your rep's just going to say, yeah, I don't think so. We're actually just going to push towards contract. It's like, that's why you have to have a good relationship. Like, otherwise it's going to end up on that side of the coin.
Yeah. Well, and to one of the points we made earlier, if you have that much of a disagreement, or you're so vehemently opposed to the position, the stance, the approach, whatever. Again, the question that I'll pose to any SE that they find themselves, if they find themselves in that situation, why? Is it for your benefit because you don't want to do this, or is it really for the customers? Is it in the best interest of the customer, or is it in the best interest of the account executive? I've never seen an account executive who would not be open to this conversation. I have some ideas that I think might help us close this deal. Are you open to that conversation? What account executive is not taking that conversation, right? Or I'm seeing some things that I think might be hurting some of our deals. Would you be open to that conversation? I mean, because at the end of the day, they can't, everybody wants to do what's right for the customer, and we want to hit our numbers. I mean, we're all the truth. And this is the interesting thing. I hear a lot of sales engineers say, well, I'm not financially driven. Well, I disagree. I mean, unless are you a volunteer employee? I mean, if you're a volunteer worker, then I'll stand down. But if you're paid for what you do, we are all financially driven. We all have a financial motivation, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So let's just be honest about it. Now, do we tend to want to do right by the customer a little bit more? Sometimes, right? Because I mean, frankly, we're not as motivated by the huge commission checks, right? So anyway, that's I could not agree more. We need to have the conversation.
I have a random question for you. So we have all these habits. Now it's been a little while since you've released the book. Are there any new habits that you think should be introduced to the book?
So in random question gets a random answer. The answer, Ryan, is yes. First of all, you mentioned it's been a while. It's been 5.5 years since I published a book. I published in June of 2019. So let's do some math on this. Within 9 months, the world shut down and changed forever. So in less than a year, I felt like there were some fundamental things about the book that just felt outdated, because I talk a lot about walking into the room, but we don't walk into the room nearly as much as we did before. In fact, that's becoming more the exception than the norm. In addition, companies like Home Run have flourished in the past 5 years. So there's countless automation or tools that automate various elements of our job that did not exist 5.5 years ago. So and I just started working on a revision. So the first answer, Ryan, is the habits. Even though the habits, I believe, are timeless, I would change the way I talk about most of them. That's number one. Are there any other habits? I don't talk at all about proof of concept, and so as you guys know, all the habits begin with the letter P. So if I were to have another habit, it would have to begin with the letter P. So prove might be one of the habits, and it's this idea that once we've gotten in the door, there might be some sort of long tail proof process, right? Proof of value, proof of concept, etc. Another one might be pursue. Once we've maybe had the opportunity to do a few demos and they're interested, we need to pursue that deal through to the end. There's probably a few others, but those are the two that come to mind are prove and pursue.
Okay, I actually this has been one of the hottest topics for me, is this idea of proof of concepts. I think I agree. I think we are at the stage in time right now where there is an aspect of when we're in our sales that we do have to prove it to some degree. That being said, do not walk into every single prospect call with the assumption that they are going to need a proof of concept. You need to have that conversation with your reps up front. If your rep is just pitching proof of concept in every deal, you are not setting yourselves up for success, because you are going to do a bunch of proof of concepts that are going to go nowhere. So the first thing that has to happen when you want to prove it, ask them, why do we have to prove it? What does this mean to your business? What does a proof of concept usually look like? Here's our recommendation, but they might tell you it looks something entirely different, which might only mean you have to do a little bit of work versus a lot of bit of work. So I do think you have to establish what it means to the actual business you're selling into versus just going in and saying, we're going to prove it, we're going to prove it, we're going to prove it. I also think we should only prove it for people that are invested in proving it. They are telling you that they are a true buyer of this. They have approval from someone. You have line of sight into who the executive buyer is. These are just key critical aspects that I think are being missed all the time in sales right now when it comes to prove it. I think proof of concept is probably the scariest terminology as it relates to sales engineers. And so I could ramble on about this all day. Samir, we've talked about this offline. Give me some thoughts on this.
I mean, I definitely agree. I think one of the biggest things is not setting up the proper guidelines and guardrails, specifically the success criteria. Here are the 3 explicit things that we are solving for. If you can say, yes, you've checked off 1, 2, and 3, that means our product can do technically what we said it can do. And we have line of sight to contract. And now we're just redlining with legal. and maybe negotiating, and sales is kind of taking it back. We've officially got the technical win. I think a lot of times is we say, yeah, we'll throw a proof of concept out there, and then don't know what does it mean to like finish it. What's the end? What does that finish line look like? And that causes deals to stall. You got scope creep, and then all of a sudden you're putting in 40 hours for this like $20K deal, and it's like, well, why did we not scope this down in the beginning? So the proof of concept, proof of value whole conversation needs to definitely continue to be had and like tighten up for sure.
Well, and guys, if I can build on that too, first of all, I could not agree more. And frankly, that's why the book doesn't include. I don't talk about the proof of concept at all. I mean, as to me, and it wasn't a big part of my sales cycle when I was in the field. But the other thought that comes to mind for me, given where we are in the evolution of software. I mean, look, guys, when I was selling software, it was 2005, 2008, 2012. We were still selling perpetual licenses, for crying out loud. We live in a subscription/consumption world now. What does that mean? It's all, the first year is always a proof of value and always a proof of concept, because you are 100% at risk of being dropped after a year if they don't realize the value or whatever that first. So to me, the first year is the proof of concept or the proof of value, right? So to me, that this just further justifies the point you're making, Ryan, right? Rather than go for a proof of value or proof of concept, why don't we do this? Why don't we start small with a small group? It's a 1 year subscription. Let's implement a plan to make you successful. And then next year, when it comes time to renew, let's take a look at where we might want to expand and grow, something like that. Because here's the mistake that so many organizations make. They do a POC, they do a POV, they put all this effort into it, both on the buyer side and the seller side. And then if it goes well, they invest, and then what happens? It gets handed over to customer success, right, or implementation or onboarding or something. They sort of lose momentum, they lose focus, they lose sight. The actual buyer themselves, the customer themselves, they lose their. And then a year later, they're like, yeah, it wasn't as valuable as we thought. We don't need to spend that money anymore, right? Because the emphasis was on the POC or the POV, not the actual implementation. So I'll come off of my soapbox now.
I think we all can be on this soapbox all day long. I think it's so important, right? Because you can prove it different ways, right? You can prove it over a 1 year contract. That could be your proof of concept. You can prove it through customer reference calls. You can prove it through a very tailored demonstration to business use cases and business outcomes. That can also be your prove it. That's why I think like this terminology of proof of concept is way too vague, because it just means a lot of different things. And it opens yourself up to go and say, all right, we're going to get you live on our product. We're going to test these things out. And then we lose line of sight into what actually matters. And we've wasted a bunch of people's time with somebody that isn't actually going to buy the product. And now I've wasted time as an SE. My AE's wasted time. Their managers have wasted time. Our technical resources have wasted time. It's so important to lock down what this means. Have a conversation with your rep before you commit to a proof of concept. And we should never commit to a proof of concept live on a call. That should never happen. It should always be an offline discussion that takes place after the call. You and your rep should get together and say, do we think this is worth it to go and enter a proof of concept with them? If you both agree, then yes, we should go and do it.
Yeah, it's good. Good. I feel the energy behind those.
It's one of those things that it beats heavy in my heart, so to speak. And then you brought up this last P for pursue. There's one thing about this pursue piece that I think could be really impactful, especially like maybe in part 2 of the book. Pursue, to me, I also think in this shift that's happened since COVID, we've stopped going and actually meeting with prospects. Pursue could mean pursue an on-site. Go get in front of someone. The amount of on-sites I've done that have led to successful deals, it's like an 80+% clip. So it's a big difference maker if you go and do it, because other people aren't doing it anymore. So pursue the deal, pursue an on-site to show them that you are really interested in gaining their business.
It's really good. It's really good, Ryan. And it's interesting. It's getting equally difficult to get in front of people, partially because many of the people that we are selling to are also working from home, right? So this is where it gets tricky. Now that's shifting a little bit, right? The government's going back to the office, and there are more organizations going back to the office, right? And so, I mean, I do think the next couple of years will be interesting to see sort of, does that trend continue or not? But I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, look, when I was in the field, 70% of our meetings were in person. I mean, or more. I mean, we just did it. Now, granted, I sold to the federal government, so we were always going, and I'm in the DC area, so, but yeah, get in front of people. I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that get in front of people, the in-between time is very valuable that you can't get over Zoom calls. The few minutes before the meeting starts, the few minutes after, walking to the elevator, grabbing like a coffee, like those 3-5 minutes of quote unquote downtime are where you actually are developing the relationships. And Ryan and I say this all the time, people buy from people. And when you show that you're a person, you have animals, pets at home, you have kids, you like playing soccer, whatever it is, those little nuggets build that trust. And I think that's why you have such a high clip rate when you go on site in person. You realize that you're just not a face on a screen. You're a 3D body like that has feelings, and you can connect on a deeper level.
That very thing happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I went to an SE leader dinner, and one of the ladies there, she came up and she said hello. She was like, I can't believe you're an actual person. Like, you're not just a face and a voice, on a video. I'm like, yes, believe it or not, I'm an actual person.
That's great. I also think too, like, there's an aspect of when you show up in front of people, be your authentic self, right? I think to a certain degree, sometimes we get in our own ways a bit on that, right? We go on site, we think we need to be this different persona of who we are. Like, yeah, you should be able to talk about your family, your kids, your passions, your pets, right? It's like all of those things are what actually helps somebody resonate and connect with you, not showing up and being so tight and rigid that you're just like, no, let's just go do our meeting together. It's like, wait a second, we're here. Yeah, that's right. Let's grab a coffee. Let's just chat about nothing related to work. Let me get to know you.
It's interesting. So you were asking about the habits, and I told you whatever the habits are, they have to have a P in it. Well, personable is one of the other habits that I've thought about adding. And to your point, Ryan, it's all about being your authentic self. And I think the more we can first of all sort of find our true voice and be our authentic, and just be personable, be curious in other people, be interested in other people. And to me, that's, and you, I think, Samir, you said it a moment ago, people buy from people. At the end of the day, whether they buy from you or not, did they enjoy the connection? Did they enjoy the meeting? Did they feel as though it was at least worth their time to spend 30 or 60 minutes with you? Right? To me, that's what this role is all about.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I know I'm taking a little time check here, and we're getting close to it. Really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation with us, Chris. Any parting words for the audience, or what's that timeline for the next edition of the book? Because
where's part two? Where's part two of the habits?
Excited about it.
I wish I could give you a timeline. We'll see. It's been a pretty. I thought I'd be further along already, but it's been a busy year. Final thoughts. I guess the only thing that comes to mind immediately is you opened by asking me about the 6 habits, and I touched on a number of the different habits, but then we spent most of our time talking about the partnership with sales, the relationship and the collaboration with sales, which is so typical, frankly. I think success in this role and satisfaction in the role really begins with our relationship and our partnership with sales. So I would tell anyone and everyone, certainly anybody listening to this, invest time and effort and energy into creating those relationships and creating those partnerships. The other thing that I and other people like me, and there's lots of other people out there doing similar things to what I do, we talk about discovery and we talk about storytelling and demo design and demo delivery and the mechanic, and all that stuff is important. But to me, the foundation is really the relationships with sales and your colleagues, and the relationship with your prospects and customers. To me, I think success in the role starts there. So I think I'll close on that note.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for coming on and really sharing your insights as it relates to pre-sales and sales engineering. It's amazing to have a legend like yourself come on. It's a book that Samir and I both have read and has been very impactful for us. So for our audience out there, if you are wanting to continue your knowledge on sales engineering, go pick up the book. And when Chris releases version 2.0, we'll have him back on the podcast and we'll make sure to push it out and help out there.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it. Good luck with the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Chris.
Bye.
All right, Samir, any thoughts here?
Oh, wow. Again, it's like another pinch me moment because, Chris is one of the first books I read when getting into the business. But I think the fact that we were drawn to focusing on the AE-SE relationship speaks volumes, because we could have talked about discovery. We could have talked about the mechanics, almost the quote unquote technical side. But to his point in his closing arguments, the relationship with your AE is probably the biggest determination of success. Like every time I had a really strong, good relationship with my AE, we were having fun. You could tell that, dynamic duo on the call, like we were having a good time. When we lost deals, it didn't hurt that bad. And when we won them, it just felt even better. So I think the fact that we spent so much time talking about how do we build that relationship, why do we feel like we're not in sales when we first join, and just all of these little kind of misconceptions that we have to unlearn was really interesting and really valuable to hear his perspective on it.
Yeah, speaking of which, I'm actually getting lunch today with one of my AEs. And again, it just allows us to get to know each other on a really personal level. And what I've noticed is the more you get to know your account executive, the person, not the business person, the more when you're in a call, there's this natural flow of like, I really understand this person. I trust them. You can almost tell from certain body language cues that they have that they're going to speak versus you to speak. So that way you're never speaking on each other's toes on a Zoom call. It's like, to me, that's one of the number one sort of keys that you would have as a buyer to say like they haven't really worked together often, is you're like always constantly about to talk on top of each other. But when I am meeting with somebody face to face, I get to know, all right, they make this little twitch in their face, like they're going to speak, or they lean in a little bit further. Now it's their time to talk. And I do think like all of those little things really impact it. But to your point, right? Like there's all these different things that we could have explored. We continue to explore the relationship with sales. And to me, the reason for that is because it really is probably one of the most impactful things as about the sale itself. It's like everything starts with a really good relationship. After that, the mechanics do really matter, right? Doing all the little things right. I do think there is a larger bucket that relates to the demonstration itself and making sure that we give impactful demonstrations. Obviously, I think discovery is a really big bucket or pillar of it. But I do think that everything starts at a foundational level of having a great relationship with your account executive counterpart. And if you don't, I highly doubt that you're probably really successful. Like, I'm just going to throw it out there. I just don't see there being a AE-SE duo out there that despise each other that are selling millions of dollars of software. I just doubt it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are one of those, like, let us know, because that would be wild. Like to your point, like your relationship with your AE is foundational. If you don't have a good relationship, you could be the best at discovery, the best at doing demos, the best at answering all the technical questions, but you have a horrible relationship with your AE, that like you're not going to close business.
Do you remember do you remember the like the food pyramid? Right. And it's like, you have your like veggies at the bottom, and then you have like fruits, and like maybe we need to make a sales engineering style pyramid. We could share that with the audience. Like, everything starts off at the base of relationship. Then there's like another pillar of it that's discovery. There's demo. I don't know, maybe like a fun exercise for us to think about. Like, be kind of funny. But yeah, I do think that everything is around that.
Yeah, we should definitely do that. You've got my mind turning, so we'll see. We'll see what comes out of this thing. And then
One other thing I will drop just on it. Chris's book is a great read. It's just like, I do think it's foundational stuff that you should be reading. So if you are an SE, definitely check the book out. Like, it will help you out in your career.
100%. Like it's one of those things that I will go back to sometimes just to like remind myself. And I think the other thing that we did touch on was the whole POC concept, and I think that fired us all up. But it is kind of broken right now, and like just way too loosely defined. And honestly, like he makes a good point of the first year is a proof of concept. I mean, it's a paid pilot. You can think of it, and I never really thought of it that way, given that, you know, contracts usually minimum is 1 year. Usually when you first sign a contract, you're not signing a 3-year deal or a 5-year. I at least maybe I've done that maybe a handful of times, but most of the time it's a 1 year, and then you're like stressed about renewal. And so I think he makes an excellent point of those 3 months you're doing a POC, all hands on deck from buyer side, seller side. We go live and it kind of like crickets occur. So I think if we change the kind of the outlook of what the proof of concept actually looks like, and it's actually your proof of concept is your first year or your proof of value, because you're not going to really feel anything. That was really interesting, and like something that I'll probably like think more deeply on, of how do I shift that perspective to even like during the sales cycle, position it in a certain way. Like you can't say your first year buying with us is proof of concept. So like, no, I'm not saying to do that, but to like position it in a way, even internally, is like, hey, when we sign them, we can't just drop the ball because we closed the deal. It's like the deal's not really closed. I mean, it's closed for the first year, but we want to keep them, so we don't churn.
I also do think there's like a value gap. Maybe we had to spend like a whole entire podcast on proof of concept, but there is a value gap too, right? If you want to go do 3-4 months within a proof of concept, well, we could have just signed a contract, went live for a 1-year proof of concept. They would have had, you know, all of customer support. They would define those use cases. They would have all those things at play. But instead, we did 3 to 4 months of proof of concept. Then it's going to be 3 months of, or however long your implementation takes. Maybe that's 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. And now you're like 6 months later down the road of them seeing the product originally, your product's changing, you're shifting. So I do think it's like you're stalling things. That's why it's better to try to figure out how can we win this without a true proof of concept, because you're delaying the business from actually having the impact. And sales is to serve. And who's that serving? Like, who does that actually serve? Really just no one, quite frankly. So that's why I think there's a bigger conversation to be had here.
Yeah, we'll probably dedicate a full pod to that. I think we have a lot to say.
Yeah.
But with that, I think the last things I'll end with the audience is sales is to serve. I really like that. I think it's a really good reminder before jumping on any call of mine, that just a little mantra in my head. Remember, sales is to serve. And that kind of puts you in the mindset of, okay, what is it that is going to be valuable to the customer and to the prospect, and how can I solve their problems? And once I solve their problems, then they're actually going to buy. So it's kind of buying is a downstream effect of being helpful.
And maybe that's the title of today's episode. I don't know. Kind of interesting, like thought-provoking episode title.
Sales is to serve. I like that. Yeah. All right. Well, this was another great episode, Ryan. We'll see you all later, folks.
See you, everyone.
Peace.